We need a laugh track. Do we have a laugh track?
No, do you want to make fun right now?
No. But it would be funny. Oh, sorry. Hello and welcome to the Mindful Life chat series with yours truly, Waylon Lewis of Elephant Journal. Today I want to talk about the single most important thing in my entire life, other than all the basics like food, sleep, mom, roof over my head. All those are vital. But this thing, which I guess is not a surprise since you already saw the title, has been the difference between me being miserable and selfish and my being miserable and selfish but having some constructive thing to do with all that, and then to be able to cheer up and be generous and dedicated to the welfare of all, not just myself. And that thing is one of the most boring things in the world, and it's called meditation. Meditation, meditation, meditation. We're here to meditate. So I was lucky enough to be born into a Buddhist family, basically my mom, and she was in a Buddhist community called Vajradhatu at the time, and they were a bunch of wild and crazy, and are we allowed to swear? Fucked up, but also wonderful and tender and sweet people. You know, they were just human beings. And they were ridiculous people. They were a bunch of hippies, and they all came together and started studying meditation and the teachings of Buddhism and partying and trying to get laid and all the usual human stuff. They were all young at the time. Now they're all old baby boomers. And so I was born into that in 1974. And, you know, I was going to seminaries, which were like 3-month retreats when I was 2, probably younger. So I grew up in this whole weird, wild, fun, boring Buddhist world. I think people forget to say how boring stuff is because you only remember the fun stuff. But Buddhism is really about sitting around with a whole bunch of other people sitting around meditating for like 6 to 9 hours a day for months straight. And that's a lot of what I remember in my childhood. So as you can imagine, being a young boy, do kids love 6 to 9 hours of total boredom with nothing going on? Behind door number 1 is yes. Behind door number 2 is no. And I think me and every other dharma brat, as we were called, walked through door number 2. We thought it was super boring. And luckily, that boredom was paired with a lack of pressure to become Buddhist ourselves. So we grew up in this wild, wonderful, boring world, but my mom really didn't pressure me to meditate or study any of that stuff. So basically, I grew up going to Sunday school, you know, Christian stuff. I grew up, you know, I was half Jewish, am half Jewish, so I grew up knowing about that a little bit. And I grew up with this Buddhist stuff. And I didn't really become Buddhist until probably I was 15 or 16, and I became Buddhist by going to high school, which was very not Buddhist in Vermont, and reading Henry David Thoreau. And I was reading Henry David Thoreau in this wonderful class with Professor Lovett, or Mr. Lovett, who's now the headmaster. And I would go back to this Buddhist retreat center where I lived, called Carmicholing in Vermont, and I highly recommend checking it out. And I would go back and I started taking some Buddhist classes, and I had this sort of condescending realization that Buddhism was kind of cool and kind of onto something a little bit, because it sort of reminded me of Thoreau, who I loved. So I said, oh, maybe there is something to this weird Buddhist stuff. It's not just a bunch of thangkas, you know, Buddhist paintings of 8-armed Buddhist weirdos doing weird things with implements and torma, which is like a Tibetan cake, ritual cake that isn't good at all. And I started being curious about it. And so I started studying Buddhism and doing meditation. And that kind of synced up with me being 16 and then me being 17 and going to college and going through all those challenges of loneliness, being off alone in college, and all the crazy fun expectations of college. And when you go to college and you're 17, you've been living in Vermont and you're bored of little small town Vermont. I went to Boston University. It's a huge city. It was super exciting. And after a couple months, you just feel kind of claustrophobic and lonely. You kind of miss all your friends, and college is such a like drink and fuck fest on some level. If you're not just trying to fuck people, but you actually want to like know people and have friends, it's really a freaky environment in a way. And also I lived with this Matthew Fellows, I think was his name. You're somewhere out there, Matthew. What's up? He did crew and never did his laundry, ever, the entire semester. So I lived in this puny little cinder block dorm room with Matthew, and we kept our windows open all winter long because it stunk so badly because of his sweaty crew socks and stuff. And he'd be partying with girls or whatever, like at 1 a.m. So I had insomnia. It was stinky. It was cold because we had the windows open. I had no friends. I kind of did, but not really. Not like how I had back in Vermont. So I would head back to Vermont, to Carmichaeling on breaks, and I would meditate so hard. I would be so happy to be able to like connect with myself genuinely, to reconnect with friends, to play basketball on the old red barn. And, you know, I was so grateful for the Dharma suddenly. So I went from sort of bored and wanting to get out there in the real world and have fun to just being grateful for what I'd grown up in. And I, of course, skipped a bunch of rungs. Like when I was 10 to 16, I staffed these Shambhala Sun summer camps, which I highly recommend for 10 to 16-year-olds. They're still going on, where we really made friends with boredom, and we meditated a little bit, and we didn't really get into the Buddhist teachings, but we kind of lived them. And they were wonderful. And there was this quality growing up of fearless vulnerability, just being willing to make friends with yourself and being kind of forced to make friends with yourself. All my mentors really encouraged me and forced me to, you know, deal with myself instead of just being a jerk or being bored or being, you know, when you're young, you're kind of crazy and full of energy. So instead of just spinning out and being wild all the time, I had to kind of deal with my own energy. And it helped me grow up and actually be of some benefit. So meditation became this thing in my life, belatedly, because I'm a slow learner, where I would wake up and I would meditate for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. And I did a couple Datans, month-long meditation retreats, and I did like 5 seminaries, which are 3-month meditation and study and kind of celebration retreats up at Shambhala Mountain Center mostly. And so my whole life became, kind of belatedly in a funny way, about Buddhism. I was so grateful for it. And not because of this big religious thing. Like, who cares? Does anyone here need to belong to a cult? Hopefully not. I think everyone wants to worship someone and like donate money to them and then get fucked over and complain about it on Instagram. But we can skip all that stuff. Buddhism is really founded on non-theism. So meaning when you bow, you're bowing with respect and friendliness. You're not bowing because you're subservient or less. You're bowing because you have a sense of humor, a sense of heart, a sense of duty to be of benefit. So that's the feeling in Buddhism, is you go into it with full kind of head and shoulders, good respect and friendliness and a sense of humor and wanting to be of benefit. So I started meditating all the time, not because I was trying to be a good boy or anything like that, but because I actually needed to. I wanted to wake up, have that moment of space or clarity that we all have, and then we get our phones out, or our to-do lists flood in, or the argument we had yesterday with our loved one or best friend comes back in, or someone said something mean to us on social media and that comes back in, or we think about the state of the world, or we have fun ideas, we want to go run around and eat cookies. It can be good or bad, but our minds are flooded with to-do lists and happy and sad stuff. So meditating first thing in the morning is one of the 2 best times to meditate in the day. You wake up, and before you get on your phone, before you start talking with or meeting people, even if you're a busy parent, just take a couple moments try. And if, kids are jumping on your face first thing in the morning, or you're late to work, or late to school, try to find one gap just to look up at the sky, breathe deeply, maybe bow silently, dedicate yourself to being a benefit. And that little attitude flip can ground your day in sanity, in clarity, instead of in your habit trail, those little wheels the hamsters love to get on, and they just run around and around and around without getting anywhere. And that's what Buddhists call samsara, the cyclical nature of suffering, where our habitual patterns kind of just encourage us to go around and around and around and around and around, like binging and purging and binging and purging and binging and purging, instead of just getting off of the habit trail, the hamster wheel, and just kind of getting grounded and breathing through it, which is not a one-time process, it's a practice. So meditation is called a practice because it's something we do again and again, not something we get perfect. And if you do get it perfect, don't worry, you'll lose it, and you'll fuck it up. I guess I'm swearing a lot now. And you'll just come back to it again and again. And the great thing about meditation is it's a practice for fucking up. It's a practice for messing up. It's a practice where you can be fully present with your breath, and then 3 breaths later you could be out in California in your mind doing whatever. Unless you live in California, in which case, in this analogy, you'd be out in New York. So that's fine, because meditation's practice is literally about noticing what's happening and coming back to the present moment. So you may have yoga friends or spiritual friends who say they meditate, and all respect, I'm sure they do. But remember, meditation is a very generalized term. It's sort of like saying food. Like, there's thousands of different meals and thousands of different culinary traditions and thousands of different foods. So if someone says they meditate, they literally could be doing the opposite thing that I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is Buddhist meditation. Buddhism, brought to you by no one. So Buddhist meditation is not about getting to a higher plane. This is the major distinction between Buddhist meditation and many other kinds of meditation, which are not bad, but they kind of are. So Buddhist meditation is about being present with whatever the heck is happening, no matter what. It's unconditional. Buddhist meditation is like unconditional love. It's there in thin times and thick times and happy times and sad times. So this is a little aside, which may or may not be very interesting. But when I was a kid, I kind of idolized Paul Newman because he seemed equally cool when he was angry or sad or happy or joking or grimacing. He just seemed totally present with whatever was going on. And I think that's part of the reason he has such a sense of humor and such a long, deep love relationship in his real life. So that's sort of the goal of meditation, is to be totally cool and Paul Newman-like with whatever is going on. And by cool, that doesn't mean putting on an act. It means being willing to hang in there with yourself. So without being all philosophical all the time, let's talk about how to actually meditate. So the how of meditation is kind of the easiest part. I can do the instruction in 60 seconds if you'd like to time me right now. Without rushing. Take a good posture. Take your best posture of the day. Actually do it right now. Do it. Take a great posture. Go through, your knees should be lower than your hips. Your spine should be super straight. Your eyes are open in this practice, not closed. Open, particularly if you're driving and listening to this podcast. What are you doing with closing your eyes? Then find your breath and relax that great, perfect posture. So you don't want a rigid perfection. That's just for perfectionists who are never perfect, by the way. So take a great posture and then relax it. That's where the sense of humor comes in. Now find your breath in and out. It's just your normal breath. Your eyes are open because you're not trying to block out the world. You're trying to mix your meditation practice with everyday life. But your eyes can be down 45 degrees, so you're not welcoming too much distraction. Now, whenever you find yourself distracted, you're breathing in, you're breathing out. You're breathing in, you're breathing out. La la la, bu-da-dee. Before long, you're thinking about something, like eating, or work, or an argument, or blah blah blah. What you have to do. You're so bored. Basketball. Whatever you want, you're thinking about it. You say, oh, I'm thinking. And it's that moment of awareness that is meditation. So you notice you're thinking, I'm thinking. You don't judge yourself for it. Oh, I suck. Waylon, you're stupid. You'll never get it right. That's not what you're doing. And if you do that, that's okay. You just notice that and you say, thinking. So it's a great attitude for life. You just notice whatever's going on. You acknowledge it. You return your attention to your breath. So your breath becomes your refuge. And breath is a stand-in for the present moment. Some people use a candle, some people use incense, some people use counting. But in this one, shamatha meditation, we use the breath. The breath is great to count on because it's not solid. So you can't get too attached to it. So don't do a big like Darth Vader breath like in yoga, like it shouldn't be too serious. That's too uptight. So just your normal breath in and out. And you might sigh once or twice like I just did. That's a little heavier than usual. Just return to your normal breath. So your breath might be like, wow, this podcast is going great so far. I haven't messed up at all. Soon I'm going to be a famous podcaster with millions of followers. People will worship me. Finally, I'll like myself. Everything will work out. I could buy that new toaster oven I've always wanted. And then you just notice that, you label it thinking, turn to your breath. So the present moment, symbolized by your breath that you take refuge in, but you can't really because it's not solid, becomes you're like a surfer surfing in and out on the waves of your breath. And then when you're done, you can kind of wrap it up, either 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, whatever you want. You can meditate with people, which is highly recommended, or alone, which is recommended because it's practical often. But either way, you begin and end with a bow to yourself, to others, to the whole world, saying, may any good karma, any merit I may have created or accrued, may that be given to the whole world, which includes me, and in not being attached and not just doing it out of navel-gazing selfishness for yourself, the good vibes keep flowing. The good karma keeps flowing. So you're not just doing this for yourself. Spirituality should not be selfish. It should be for all sentient beings, and that includes yourself. So as they say in Buddhism, if you want to be happy, think first of others. If you want to be unhappy, think only of yourself. Good advice for life. So that's meditation practice. I hope that all made sense. Any questions? Quiet group today. So do that in the morning, do that in the evening. Those are the two most auspicious times to meditate, because when you first wake up, you have that moment of gap right before all the to-do lists. Even if the to-do lists flood in and you have to deal with the children or running off to school or whatever, then you can meditate in some gap. Try to do it before you're making decisions in your day. I have a blog on Elephant that says, if I don't meditate in the morning, I'm an asshole. That's literally the title of the blog, although I think we edited it so it was child-friendly. But basically, I'm a stupid jerk face who makes dramatic, drama-filled decisions. Like, you're just more uptight and more self-involved, and that's never a good way to be in the business world, or as a parent, or in a relationship, or by yourself. So, meditate in the morning, even a couple minutes will transform your relationship to yourself. If you have time, open up a book and read a paragraph, even one paragraph of Dharma, Buddhism. I recommend Pema Chodron above all others. Pema is my God. I worship at the altar of the idol, Pema Chodron. No, but really, She's just another human being. That's the Buddhist idea. But she's grounded, she's tough, she's warm, she's accessible. She's been on Oprah. She's so accessible. Pema Chodron is where I would start. There's plenty of other good Buddhist books on Elephant Journal. I have a couple blogs called Best Buddhist Books for Beginners and Best Classic Buddhist Books. I recommend all of those. There's titles in various traditions in those lists. But Pema Chodron, if you got just one book to take with you when you're flying and you're Tom Hanks and you're going to the island with whatever his name was, Wilbur, bring your Pema Chodron with you. So, and there's lots of Pema Chodron on elephantjournal.com as well. So, those are the books I recommend. Any book by Pema Chodron. People say, which one? I say all the titles they're ridiculous. Somehow they A/B tested these titles in heaven, Tushita heaven. So whatever you're going through, you'll read a Pema Chodron title and you'll be like, that one's for me, and you'll grab it. Usually it's when things fall apart, because we're all under the illusion that things are pretty good and then they fall apart. But the fact is, things are always falling apart. So whenever you see that title, you're like, well, how auspicious. It must be for me right now. But really, your whole life has been a disaster since you were born. And that's just how it is. We're surfing in and out on chaos and impermanence, and that's kind of okay. And that's where that sense of humor and groundedness within the chaos can be helpful. Trungpa Rinpoche has this great quote that says, chaos should be regarded as extremely good news. So after meditating, you won't become perfect. You won't become not yourself. It's not a diet. It's not a spiritual diet for your ego. It's just going to allow you to be more yourself. You'll be more yourself. You'll have even more character. You'll never not be irritating to those who don't like you, but you'll just be yourself. And without a little bit of the drama and the self-importance, with a little bit of a light touch, an ability to come back to the present moment after a hard meeting or a hard anything. And then if you meditate right before you go to bed, if any of you have insomnia or stress or whatever, and you wind up dreaming about work or not falling asleep, meditation, even for 30 seconds before you lay your head down on the pillow, can be so helpful. And then dedicate the merit of your day to all sentient beings. I literally say, by this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the storm of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. But you can say, by this merit, may my day have been of benefit. You can word it in your own way. You can pray. Whatever works for you to dedicate your life to be of bigger benefit will help you not kind of be overly clingy and attached to any goodness. And then the goodness will keep flowing. So that's sort of the Buddhist notion of life. It's not about, clinging to pleasure and pushing away pain. It's just about breathing through the tough stuff and breathing through the good stuff and being appreciative and being dedicated to the welfare of others and being kind to yourself, which is the Buddhist notion of Maitri, which is something I talk about in one of our other chats. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you meditate in the morning, meditate in the evening. If you don't, you will be guilt-tripped about it by yourself for the rest of your life. They say the second you've heard about dharma or meditation, you are haunted for the rest of your life. So they also say people go millions of lifetimes without encountering the dharma. So if you've heard this, you are incredibly fortunate, not because you heard it from me, I apologize for that, but because hopefully some little bit of my experience with the dharma has been communicated to you, and you can make your own relationship with the dharma, which is simply yourself, your breath, your aspiration to be of benefit and to enjoy this life. And remember, joy is sort of the point of all of this. If any of this is felt too serious, joy is a relief. So in Buddhism, there's two classes of people who are on the path. One is those who have crossed from confusion to enlightenment, and the second higher class is those who have passed from confusion to enlightenment while enjoying the entire journey. So try to enjoy the journey. Don't be too hard on yourself. And try to meditate in the morning, tomorrow morning. Thank you.